I've done a couple of videos in which I, number one, tell you what is magic, and number two, tell you how Mercury or thought form works. And essentially, that is our mind, that is polarity in a philosophical, magical sense, whereby we enact one thing and we unite it with what it is not. And in doing so, we bring forth, the universal will or the spirit through uniting what is with what is not. And my aim was to basically get here to this video, which is where I want to talk to you about polarity in sexual magic. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the feminine side of things, but I want to tell you that it's important for both sexes to know. And the reason is, if you happen to have a male body, and even if you're not heterosexual, or even if you don't work sexual magic per se, essentially by having that body, it means that you have a particular power as a symbol. So you're like a living symbol of essentially the phallus, so essentially the creative force of God, because probably also literally, unless you're been castrated, and even so, you still have this potential, you still have this way of moving energy. You have basically the ability to bring spirit out of pure potential into manifestation and direct it. So that is what a male body does. It's a symbol. It's a symbol, but by symbol, it doesn't just mean abstract. It means that's how it operates. That's how it moves energy through everything it does. And in magic, we work with primarily what we have on that level, and then we unite with what we are not. Now, a female, by contrast, is having a female body means that you have a magnetic power to draw the creative force of God or of spirit. And you basically, in drawing that, you bring it to earth, you bring it down to earth, you ground it. So if it's an electrical circuit, it's like you're the ground in the electrical circuit. And you then also can nurture what that is, nurture that principle of will, and bring it out, as it were, as a magical child. So the two sides are, as I've been saying in the two other videos, they're unalterable facts, and it doesn't really pertain, again, to your sexual orientation, to your gender expression. You might be transsexual, it still doesn't matter for a magical purpose. I mean, on a social level, it makes all the difference in the world, right? It may be your personal identity. It may give you satisfaction and happiness that you never had, or what have you. That's all true, and that's fine. But the point that I'm making is, from my experience, and I tried working the male principles in a female body for about 14 years, and so I have experience of doing that and not having it be effective. And then comparatively, for the last 8 years, I've been working the sexual principles of the female in a female body, and finding that extremely powerful, finding myself no longer hampered by the assumption that I can do anything. So again, on a social level, yes, we can do anything, and everyone should be free to enact any possibility on a social level. That's fine. That's not a problem. But what I'm talking about is the natural symbolic force that things have, and specifically our bodies. So again, in this video, I'm going to talk about both the male and the female, but of course I'll focus on the female. But when I talk about the female, I'll talk about it not only from the perspective of having a female body, but of not having one, and how you can work with that, these principles, even if you're male, and especially if you're male. I do speak with, granted, a lot of heterosexual male practitioners in different traditions of Tantra. And so a lot of times folks like that do have female partners, or they wish to, and they may or may not understand how to work with a female, because they really don't have experience of being female. So I'm going to go beyond just the things I've been talking about a little bit with the polarity of energy, either directing it or drawing it and nurturing it. But I will talk about that in depth, but I will also talk about the natural cycles of a female, their Kabbalistic basis, and also the characteristic of a female versus a male. Because again, it's just not a popular topic these days. It's a very unpopular one, but I think it's super important and again, I come from a place of holding the popular view that I'm exactly like a male. I can do what a male does in a male way, and I found out that wasn't true. And so I'd like to share a bit of my experience and my knowledge as far as my studies in this video about sexual polarity. Let's talk about the Kabbalistic tree of life and magic. So the basic intent of magic is simple in the Western tradition. It's to marry heaven and earth. And so the idea is that we all are angels above the abyss. We all are, in Hokmah, we all partake of the true will, and we all bring it down. So that part is true. That part we don't, basically above the abyss in the supernal realm where you have Hokmah, Binah, and Kether, or as planets, those are Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune. Up there, there's no gender, there's no sex. So everything up there, all the opposites are united. So again, as I said in another video, in Hokmah, we are both simultaneously, and there's no contradiction there, unique individual built beings, and one, numerically one. We are God. So basically things that we really can't wrap our minds around happen up there, and so we're not sexed, and essentially. But yet when we come down, again, everything below the abyss is dual. So we have one of two forms. And again, regardless of all the other layers of differentiation and difference and qualities that we may have. So we have, again, the intent in magic to marry heaven and earth. And the basic thing that we do to do that in all ways at all times is to take something that is and marry it with or unite it with something that is not, so that we're bringing basically the left side of our tree together with the right side and uniting it in the middle pillar, and taking it back up to God again. So it's like there's just this constant cycle. So that's the basic form that magic takes, what we're supposed to be doing with it. And then there's the formula of the Tetragrammaton. So I just talked about Hokmah and Binah. So we have this idea that essentially there's the true will is, even though in reality there are no spheres above the abyss, they're all one. But we split them into three because we have a dualistic mind, and that's what's doing the thinking right now. So we have to conceive of God the Father, that's Hokmah, and God the Mother, that's Binah. So we already have this idea of the yang and the yin, and that's just something our mind has to think about, even when we're talking about above the abyss, where there is no gender or sex, so to speak. And so for the purposes of our minds that think dualistically, we can say that we have the yod and the hey. We have the dad and the mom. And they're always, when you see an alchemical text, you will oftentimes be confronted with this picture of a king and a queen essentially having sex. And what that is portraying is the idea that above the abyss, or in the realm of pure potential, before anything is manifested, those polarities are always one. They are never found apart. So that's another way of saying there's only one sphere above the abyss. Again, we can say Yod He, Vav He. So the idea is that male and female, God and goddess, those principles. So God sort of in our minds gets things going, and the goddess gives it some form, a potential form. So that's like fire and water above the abyss, and then it comes down, and then the spheres that are right below those top three spheres are called the Ruach, or the mind, and that is the realm of sun, or Vav, and those spheres, which are Hesed, Gebura, Tiferath, Nitzach, and Had. So those middle spheres are the sun, principle, and then the last two spheres of Yesod and Malkuth, the earth, are the daughter. And so, in older Kabbalah, where we're just talking about God and how God creates, and we're kind of thinking about God as somebody out there, it starts out in the top, and it wends its way down, and then it finally reaches us here, and hopefully we get blessings if we're doing the right things that we're supposed to do, and things like that. We're following God's law, etc., etc. But in magic, in Thelemic magic, we take personal responsibility to bring spirit all the way down and work with it in our incarnations. Now, the sexual polarity part comes in where basically a male is working out of Hokmah or mind, and it essentially is represented symbolically by the Ruach, and a female is working out of Malkuth, the earth principle, to draw. Again, we have a magnetic power to draw down spirit, and we're working the realm of the daughter symbolically. Okay, again, it doesn't have anything to do with your personal identity or that like somehow we're trapped. So I just want to say that I'm trying to make this distinction by giving myself as an example. So again, a male, I should say, works with mind and directs the creative force. He has a penis, so in theory, he can bring literally the creative seed of God through the semen. It isn't the semen, but if he does it correctly, and that's a whole other, that's like a whole lifetime's worth of study there, but can bring it through out into manifestation and direct it, and then the female can draw it and nurture it and then bring it all the way out into manifestation that way. Now, let's just talk about ordinary, typical, men and women, sort of assumed, characteristics of a male or a female, if they're typical. A typical male, and I think this is important if you are one, and you're working magic, to pay attention to this, is the difference between a male and a female. And again, this could be, an unpopular opinion, and I'm just going to hold myself up as an example of somebody who really tried to work like a male and just couldn't. However, not because I am not intellectual, because I'm a super intellectual person. I think that comes through the videos, and have a PhD from a major university in philosophy. So it's not that I lack intellectual ability. I clearly have, wonderful thoughts and such, but there's still a way in which thought is not dominant in me. What do I mean by that? Whereas it is in a male. And that's super important because if you have thought dominant, if you're primarily acting, as the sun, you have a male body, especially if you are just, going with that, if you haven't taken hormones and things like that, then you essentially have first of all, a cooler perspective on things, and you may also have a detachment, whether you like it or not, from more emotional realm. So in other words, a woman has both the curse and the blessing, a female has both the curse and the blessing of being more emotional, more moody, more changeable, and that is a characteristic of the moon. You saw it, I'll get more into that, than a male. And so, a wise female will be, conscious of her moods and how they move through cycles and work with them. So there's specific things I'll say about that, and I may have to split this into multiple videos because there's a lot of information here. But I think the first thing to recognize is that we're not alike. And despite all the rhetoric and despite all the, the politics and things like that, which I understand the purpose of it, because I do agree that every individual should be free, should not be limited arbitrarily, and that's something Thelema says. We should not be limited arbitrarily from the outside. We should have everything in principle the same as one another, but in practice and reality, we're not the same as one another, and we do have this split that we should work with magically if we're magicians. So I think the first thing to be sensitive to if you are male, and especially if you're dealing with females in any capacity, is that you really don't understand what we go through in terms of the ups and downs of our moods, and how that really colors just everything, our whole entire experience. And it's something that has power in it if well used. So, one thing that I have learned, and I have to say too, one thing that we look at in astrology is the elements in our chart. So if you ever look at your chart and you see, I've got like 9 points of fire and 3 points of water, and there's ways of counting the planets and seeing what signs they're in, and then seeing how much of the different elements you have in them. Now, water is emotion. That's the basics of it. So I happen to be female with a very low water score, and it doesn't mean I don't have emotions. What it means is that I have a hard time processing my emotions. So it's very easy for me to lie to myself, to deny them and stuff. But then, like, at the same point, out the back end, then I explode and I go nuts if I actually don't pay attention to them. So it's something that I've had to really learn emotional intelligence through a long period of years, because I have so much intellect and other elements, but I don't have much access to my own emotions, yet I am female. So what I'm talking about here is the fact that regardless, I'm ruled by it. And so that, but on the positive side, that is the force. So essentially, the intellect, the ruach in general, just what men have more strength in, and women have less strength in, is not smarts. It's not an intelligence, but what it is creating a form. And again, the point is to put that form in motion in a certain direction. So that's a good thing, but on the other hand, they lack force, and that is what the female has. So having the emotions and having a connection to earth and having a connection to nature gives me power. It gives me force. And so then I've had to kind of like put that in play, learn to connect with my opposite, my inner God primarily, and then of course if I work with a male partner, then working with him correctly so that he basically becomes an embodiment of my male God. So again, it's not that it's bad or good, and we have this. Basically, let's just be realistic. The people, everyone, regardless of whether they want to say women should belong in the kitchen or whether they want to say women can do anything, and how dare you say I'm this different from a male. Either way, the fact is we hate the feminine. Let's just be realistic about that. We're saying it sucks. We're saying that, like, why would you want to be this force? Why would you want to be of the earth? That's what we're really saying. Our whole culture, no matter what side of the divide you're on, hates the feminine. And so let's all take a look at it as a positive thing and look at what the good of it is. And now the hatred, besides all the resentment from being denied things, or from whatever, or from, on the one hand, if you're female, or on the flip side, the more the culture that we've inherited hates the female. Because why? Because the earth, we talk about the earth and the body, we're really talking about something that resists. We're talking about something that has its own ways. And, the spirit is this thing that just says, no, everybody should be the same and universal. So, historically in religion in the last aeon, the best we could do was to all be the same, all be like Christ. And that's a male, that's basically the sun. And the reason is, God has his will, and it's embodied in this Christ figure, and it's it might be wonderful, it might be love and stuff, but if you're different from that, if you're resistant to that, you're bad, you're evil. And the body is that which resists, and the woman is that which is traditionally allied with the devil for that reason. She's the one who in the Garden of Eden basically took from the snake as advice and ended up eating from the tree. And so again, we kind of all have to face the fact that we've inherited this immense burden of hatred of the feminine. And whether we're denying that and we're saying, yay, rah, rah, I'm a woman and I can do anything, but can you be yourself? Can you actually access your power? Can you love your femininity? That's my question. And in Magick, it's like, if you don't do it, trust me, you won't get anywhere. And as a male, can you love the feminine as your hidden opposite, as your goddess, regardless of your sexual orientation? So that's what I want to get more and more into. I'll just keep on making videos because I think these are going to get too long otherwise.